Really glad you guys are enjoying the SAT prep series. Today we're going to be going over writing and language. So if you were here last session, we were doing the reading portion of SAT prep, but this week we're doing writing and language, which has to do more with typical conventions of the English language, grammar, sentence structure, diction. We'll get more into that as we talk about those things during the session today. If you don't know me, my name is Danielle. I'm one of the University of Chicago summer interns here in Mexico City, helping out with these sessions. And I'm really excited that I get to see some of you again. I'd like to introduce my other intern.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is George. I am also one of the U Chicago interns here at Education USA Mexico City, although I am working remotely right now. I was not able to join in on the other SAT prep sessions as I was away visiting family, but I'm so glad to now get to be here to help with these sessions and help you all. Nice to be here.
Thank you, George. And then I'd also like to introduce our supervisor, who will just be listening in and watching over the session today. Yandi, if you want to take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you find these sessions helpful.
Thank you, Yandi. So we're actually going to get started. George is going to start us off here with just a short little icebreaker, kind of asking everyone, what do they know about the SAT writing and language section? Take it away, George.
Yeah, and basically, we're just wondering how you guys are feeling regarding this section of the section of the SAT. What do you think you might need to work on and such like that?
Feel free to unmute or say in the chat how you guys are feeling or what you guys already know about this section. Is this your guys' first time hearing about the writing and language section? If it is, it's completely okay.
Yeah, even if you don't know anything about it, it's okay. We'll be going over it in this session.
Nobody? Okay, no worries. Well, we might as well get started then, so we can have people kind of talk about what goes on here. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. If you want to answer the question or just literally talk about anything, raise your hand, or you can unmute, interrupt us. Please feel free, don't be afraid. We want to take your suggestions. So what is the SAT writing and language test? So the SAT writing and language test, it kind of asks you to be an editor, and the questions are framed in a way where you're going to have to, suggest different ideas, recognize sentence structure, grammar, the usage of words and punctuation to kind of fix the question, so to speak. We'll show you some examples, but typically the questions are framed to have very deliberate errors. George, if you want to talk about more so like the structure and the time.
Yeah, so for this portion of the test, there, as you can see, there's 44 passage-based questions, 11 questions for each of the 4 passages that will be on the test, with all multiple choice responses. There will also be a narrative passage to read for this, and the rest of the questions about this may also be argumentative, like regarding what might be trying to be said in the passage and such like that. But these questions followed into two main types. Those where you must improve the expressions of ideas, meaning that the passage may not necessarily be incorrect or anything like that. It's just asking you how to better reword whatever the passage is saying so that it gets its point across better. And there are also those where you must recognize and correct errors. These will be actual grammatical or some other kind of mistake in the passage. And it can happen in sentence structure, the grammar, the usage of certain words, and punctuation. And for this portion of the test, you will have 35 minutes to complete it.
Thanks, George. So what should we expect? Well, the writing and language passages can range from about 400 to 450 words. You shouldn't expect anything too complex, though the type of material you'll be reading will vary in complexity. So let's say there's a narrative piece and there's also a science piece. Of course, those will be dealing with different types of conventions. So just to keep that in mind, the passages you'll read will be informative and kind of explanatory, nonfiction narratives. Sometimes I've seen eulogies be put in the SAT, or there will be argumentative pieces, which will cover topics in areas of careers, social studies, humanities, and science. So they kind of interchange and work differently with one another, but you should generally expect to see the type of material that we've shown here. One or more passages will be accompanied by one or more informational graphics. This is specifically true for the science ones and some nonfiction. So just keep that in mind. You may be asked to interpret some of the information on those graphics. It also may be beneficial to strategize enough time between passages evenly to ensure that you can answer every question on the exam. What does this mean? So we mentioned on the previous slide, 44 passage-based questions, 11 questions per passage. And so if you have about 35 minutes, you want to make sure that you allot enough time between questions and passage reading to make sure you answer everything effectively. George, if you want to go over some of the resources we have here in case they want to continue studying after the session today.
All right, so Khan Academy, as it might have been mentioned in previous sessions, has a course specifically made for the preparing for the SAT, and this includes informational videos on the writing portion of this SAT. So that's a good resource to turn to if you want to learn more about what to expect and to get some practice with it. The College Board also offers several different practice exams, as probably also might have been mentioned in previous sessions for the SAT prep. There are several different practice exams you can take, but if you want to practice the writing portion of the test, you can download any one of the practice exams they offer and time yourself for 35 minutes and try and do that writing portion of the exam. And here I'll let Danielle talk about the rest of these resources here.
Yeah, so most commonly I used Khan Academy and the College Board, but these other three provide free resources as well. The Princeton Review, you might know them. They're very famous for the informational books that they provide every year for SAT prep, but they're also pretty infamous online. I mentioned this, however, while they have some free resources, a bulk of their products do charge money, so just be mindful that there are free alternatives to the Princeton Review, and I would recommend using a combination of all of these. Kaplan is a little less known, but you might have also seen Kaplan books hanging around. I know while organizing some of the books in the library, we have some Kaplan books. So you can always take the kaptest.com, which is basically just their free practice module. But like the Princeton Review, majority of their resources will cost money. So avoid those if you absolutely feel that you need them. Of course, pursue them, but we have free alternatives. And then Prep Scholar is free. It's basically a blog-based preparatory sort of blog. They also have stuff on college admissions, so you might have seen them more commonly if you're interested in crafting your common application. So I have provided all 5 of these resources. From the ones I've used here, I've used Khan Academy, College Board, and Prep Scholar. I know people that have used Kaplan and Princeton Review. However, the majority of people use Khan Academy because it's free. They help you through all the sections. And yeah, George, which one of these do you think you've used the most?
The main ones I've used personally were more of the practice exams provided by College Board. That's the main resource I was using, but I also did brush up a little bit more on my writing exam through Khan Academy. I didn't really use much of the others. In fact, I actually hadn't heard of Kaplan before. So yeah.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, as you can see, both of us kind of use the same things because they work and they're free. College Board has abundance of free practice tests, and we will go over them. So make sure you guys make note of these. Hint, hint. Anyways, so we're going to be going over some of the different aspects of the questions. So I devised a little cute graph here that we're going to have. We also have the names with the shortened part, just so you guys can kind of remember. We mentioned earlier there's like different expression of ideas or word usage. So how do these questions fit into each one of these categories? So the first one, command of evidence. In this section, for writing and language, you might be asked to improve the way passages develop information and ideas. For instance, you might choose an answer that sharpens an argumentative claim or adds a relevant supporting detail. This will usually be worded along the lines of like, pick the supporting detail that fits into this passage. Similar to that, not my words, of course, but that is the general idea of the command of evidence kind of questions. Words in context. So we mentioned diction. What is diction? It's kind of a fancy word of saying word choice. So you're just trying to improve the word choice that is selected in the passage. So sometimes passages or sentences in the question or the passage itself will seem a little weird. The point is that you'll be asked to pick a word from the multiple choice answers that'll best fit into the context of the passage, often with the purpose of improving syntax, the style, and the tone. So we're going to work through that to see how we can do that, because I understand some words it might feel a little subjective, like how am I going to know which word fits better? Or what if I don't actually think there needs to be change? So those are the first two. George, if you want to cover the other two.
Yeah, so the next type of aspect that can be found in these questions is the expression of ideas, which focuses mainly on like the structure of a passage, how it develops the topic it's talking about, how the passage is organized, and the kind of language it uses, also like diction. For this kind of question, you may be asked which words or structural changes can improve how a point is made, or which phrase or sentence provides the most effective transition between ideas. It's kind of similar. It's a bit similar to the idea of words in context, but this focuses more on like bigger portions of the passage rather than maybe like a few words. And the last aspect that you should be focusing on with these kinds of questions is standard English conventions, which focuses on the aspects of the mechanics of writing, sentence structure, usage, and punctuation. And you'll be asked to edit the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard written English. So with this kind of question, you'll probably see like maybe some out of place comma or period or some other punctuation mark or some other problem with like a sentence or something along those lines. That's things that seem out of place when it comes to standard English writing. And now I'll let Danielle continue.
Yeah, so we actually have our first question of the day. Someone asks, how long is our session going to take? So generally, we plan for the maximum time to last until 6 p.m. So the total session is 2 hours. However, generally we'll end about, sometimes 30 minutes early or 20 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how much we get through. And if people have questions, of course, we take into account a lot of things. So last session, it ended at about 30 minutes before the 6th, but today just typically expect to be here about an hour and a half and more, max to be 2 hours. So I hope that answers your question, which I'm going to actually open the floor. I know this is a lot of information. Do you guys have any questions so far about what you're expected to answer, the structure of the test, anything? Feel free to unmute or just say in the chat. No problem. Everyone good so far? No questions? I think we're all doing okay. Okay, perfect.
Just remember that at any point you can ask a question. If you're confused about something or need clarification on anything, at any point you can ask a question. Yeah.
Now we're going to get right started into sentence basics. So for the rest of the session, we're going to be kind of going over typical grammar rules, sentence structure, words, everything you need to know about the basics of the English language. So woohoo! After the session, you can say that you're literally perfect in English, probably more than I am on a daily basis. So congratulations. So answers. The sentence basics is just basically going to cover like some things you should look for in the answers and some things to avoid. So one thing I'm always going to emphasize for the SAT, if you know me, try to be as concise as possible. They're going to put answers there that have way too many words and seem a little complicated for like no reason to trip you up, because you're going to pick the answer that looks complicated and messy and you're not really going to understand. So the first example, wordiness. What do we mean by that? Too many words are like empty calories. You want to remove those spare words in a sentence and try to be as specific and concrete as possible. So sometimes the questions might ask you to pick an answer that best makes the idea more concise or remove words. So example, here's a wordy sentence. It would be safer to destroy the chemicals rather than to store them. Do you guys see what's the problem there? It seems a little too redundant. Like we could remove a few words there. A better example would be, it would be safer to destroy the chemicals than to store them. You remove the rather part and it makes it so much more clear. It makes it less convoluted, and it's just one word that you're removing. In addition, we also have prepositions. So that's like of, and, but, all that stuff. For, all of the details, all the details. You see that change? It's saying the same thing, but you're not saying of or for. And it'll depend on the context, of course, because sometimes you will need to say of or for in a sentence, but a lot of the times you don't. And if you're writing on a Word document, you might not really even use it, or it'll mark it if you have those prepositions that don't need to be there. So George is going to go over parallelism.
Yeah, so parallelism basically is just the idea of parallelism helps to improve the flow of ideas and heighten their impact. It's basically like, I guess I'll explain when showing the example. It's like regarding the structure of one part versus another part of a sentence. If those parts are worded similarly grammatically, then the ideas that will convey will flow better, because the similarity of the form helps the reader recognize the similarity of the content or the function. And we can see that here in this example right here. In this first sentence, it says, swimming is better exercise than to ski. I mean, and while it technically isn't very wrong, you can kind of see it feels a little awkward to read out, because Because you can see the first action that's being talked about, swimming, is being compared to that of skiing. And but the problem is skiing is worded differently. It is worded as to ski. So it doesn't really flow correct. It doesn't feel very like natural because of it. Whereas the correct example that's right below it saying swimming is better exercise than skiing flows better because the two actions are structured basically the same here. Likewise, this could also probably be worded so that it flows using the preposition to. So you could say to swim is better exercise than to ski. That could also work a bit more, but I feel here swimming and skiing would work best for it. But it's just the main point here is that these actions should be structured about written the same, like in a similar fashion, so that the ideas flow better. I'll go up to Daniel now.
Thank you, George. I couldn't have said it any better. You just want to make sure that the verbs are in the same tenses and you're saying them similarly with the same endings. So, modifier and placement. So you guys might be a little intimidated. What is that? So I'm going to explain a little bit what a modifier is. What is a misplaced modifier? It's a modifier that gives a misleading meaning by being incorrectly placed in a sentence. So we're going to read these examples. Okay. The first one, it says, he told her that he wanted to marry her frequently. Reading that, any of you guys want to point out what sounds kind of off about this sentence, if you feel brave? Yep, okay, we're getting somewhere. So frequently is an adverb, right? And in English, I think there's a lot of luxury in putting it in different parts of the sentence. The first sentence, you can say it and we'll understand, but it sounds really wrong. So the modifier should be put before the verb. So the right way. He frequently told her that he wanted to marry her. So you can see how that flows a lot better. It's modifying the part where the person is doing the action, as opposed to where the first example, he wanted to marry her frequently, is the tense that is getting modified, as opposed to the told part. But we want the he told her to be the frequently part, not the he wanted to marry her frequently. Because as we know, marrying isn't a frequent kind of thing, as opposed to just telling someone. Right, exactly. The meaning changes completely. So a dangling modifier, it gives the false impression that it modifies a word or group of words, but what it modifies has been left out of the sentence. So we're going to do this game again, okay? After writing the introduction, the rest of the report was easy. So this actually doesn't sound that bad, right? Like, after writing the introduction, the rest of the report was easy. But there's a different type of tense being used in both parts of the tenses. So we're going to read this next example. After I wrote the introduction, the rest of the report was easy. So the first part, okay, I'll be guilty. In normal everyday speech, I say this all the time because we're not actively thinking of using the correct tenses. If you said the first one, I would understand you and no one's going to bat an eye. But on the SAT, writing implies that you are actively doing something. So the rest of the part just kind of doesn't fit. After I wrote the introduction, it is implying a cause and effect or a continuation of events, which is why the second one sounds a lot better. After I wrote the introduction, the rest of the report was easy. And it's also showing how you're looking back, as opposed to confusing the reader or the person who's going to be looking at this, like, after writing the introduction. So is this happening now? Is this happening later? It's hard to tell. So that's kind of the different aspects of the modifier.
Before I continue, I have another note to make about that. The other thing that the wrong example omits is the subject. It could be for this, I feel like it could also be like referring to like any person writing in the introduction rather than like I, the proper subject that's shown in the right example. That's another thing to keep in mind when it comes to these dangling modifiers. Like in the wrong example, it omits the I, like as in I am the one that wrote or is writing the introduction. Yeah, so that's also something to keep in mind with these dangling modifiers in regards to it leaving out information.
Thank you, George. Exactly. I can't believe I missed that. Literally the entire point of this. You have to make sure you know what you're modifying. In the first one, obviously, you can kind of imply if you're talking about it, it's you. But we don't know that through the sentence. Your reader's not going to know. So we want to clarify. Yeah, so George is going to be doing the logical comparisons.
All right, so the logical comparisons here, it's just making sure that the sentence compares the correct number and types of things so that the comparison is logical. So let's look at this first example here. This one is saying, your locker is always neater than me. This sentence here doesn't actually, this doesn't make very much sense because what's the comparison that's happening here is a locker versus a person itself, like me as in the person, the whole person itself. That kind of comparison doesn't exactly flow very well because, well, you're not a locker and a person overall are kind of pretty different. So you're not going to really be wanting to compare those sort of things. And you can see that here in the correct example where it says, your locker is always neater than mine, which makes much more sense because chances are when you're talking about a locker, you're not going to compare it to yourself and how neat you are, but rather how neat your own locker is compared to the other person's, which is why your locker is always neater than mine and flows better and actually makes sense. For the next example here, we have, my sister is better than everybody at solving differential equations. Here, it might seem like it could be an okay sentence, but the thing is, it's a bit ambiguous because when you say everybody, it implies like every single person ever. Maybe it could be everyone in a specific context, but that's not necessarily clear here because it's trying to talk about every single person. Compare that here with the correct example saying, my sister is better than everybody else at solving differential equations. There it is more clear that it's talking about people in a specific like context. Maybe it's like people in her school or something like, or in her class and such like that. Because, yeah, I will let Danielle continue from here.
Perfect. So yeah, logical comparisons, you might not even have to use this much on the SAT, but just something to keep in mind. So here is the fun part that I'm going to make you guys say out loud: subordination and coordination. Okay, so what am I talking about? Okay, coordinating conjunctions. Remember I was mentioning like the conjunction before? No, those are prepositions. These are like the words that you're going to use to connect independent clauses in compound sentences. Okay, so how do you remember them? So there's this word, fanboys, that you can say to remember any of them. So F is for, A is always. I don't even, okay, why is it N?
Oh, you missed it. Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I guess you can keep it. I guess you could keep it there as like a way to make the acronym flow better. It
like
not,
and? Like, okay, let's say N is like and.
Yeah, that works.
Doesn't have any. So
yeah,
N is like and.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah,
we have but for B, O is or, Y is yet, and S is so. So fanboys, okay? So you guys can remember the coordinating conjunctions. So someone is asking, can you add me to the study group? So I want to emphasize beforehand that while I do share the PowerPoint presentations in PDF form in the study group, you guys are going to be missing a lot of tips if you guys don't attend as much as you can until the recordings after we're all done with this series. So that might take a month's away. So at the end of the session, I will send you guys a study group. So just hold tight. Hopefully you can stay as long as possible, but allow us to just kind of go through each convention. Okay, thank you. Subordinating conjunctions. So what is the difference? So these are used to connect a dependent clause to an independent clause in complex sentences. So you guys are probably thinking, oh my God, what is a dependent clause? What's an independent clause? I don't know these. That's okay, because we'll go over them. So just remember these conjunctions. This one is not as interesting as fanboys. Like, it doesn't sound as normal, but it's wubbis. And it's really stupid, I know, but it's funny. So you can, next time someone asks you, what are all the subordinating conjunctions? As, although, after, while, when, unless, because, before, if, since. Wubbis. There you go. Just yell at someone wubbis, and then you will be automatically big brain. So that's generally the kind of, I don't know how to call it. Is it like acronyms or just like the shortened versions so you can remember all of them? So yeah, George, do you want to bring up anything else that kind of helped you remember these?
I didn't have it necessarily for these, but I figured maybe I could explain the concept of dependent clauses and independent clauses. So the idea with, independent clauses are basically like, they basically are sentences or part of a sentence that can stand on its own. Like you can say an independent clause and end it with a period to mark the end of a sentence. So you could say, so let's use an example with the coordinated conjunctions to show independent clauses in action. So you can say, I like ice cream and he likes pizza. The and connects two independent clauses. The first one being I like ice cream, the second one being he likes pizza. Both of those independent clauses can stand on their own as proper full sentences. However, dependent clauses are parts of a sentence that cannot stand on their own generally. For example, you could say he left the party before midnight. So he left the party is an independent clause because it can stand on its own as a complete sentence. But what follows the subordinating conjunction before the word before is just midnight. Midnight on its own cannot stand as a full-on sentence. It's just a word. And likewise, any clause that follows the word before is generally a dependent clause and it cannot stand as its own sentence, unlike the independent clause that comes before one of these subordinating conjunctions.
Perfect. So George once again explains the concept much better, just so you guys know in what context you would use these conjunctions. Just another example, right, for subordinating conjunctions, because I feel like is the most popular one that people use to start a sentence. So let's say we have this clause, okay? I'm trying to think of an example. Okay. Because he wouldn't wear a seatbelt. He wouldn't wear a seatbelt can stand on its own, but some people add like the because, and then before that would be a dependent clause. And so that's kind of where you would usually use the subordinating conjunctions. It's a little confusing, but kind of to show, because I feel like coordinating conjunctions are a little easier to kind of understand. You have two sentences that stand on your own, and then you're just connecting them. But the subordinating conjunction, you have like, I don't know, what could I put it in? At midnight. Okay.
I've actually thought of a better way to explain subordinating conjunctions. It's something I remember when. So the better way to think about how subordinating conjunctions work is if they come at the beginning of a sentence. Like you could say, for example, when the clock strikes midnight, he will leave the party. This can be split into two clauses. The first one is the dependent clause, the one that starts with when. The dependent clause is when the clock strikes midnight. That there forms a complete dependent clause because of the subordinating conjunction that is present And because of that, that cannot stand as a complete sentence because of that when. That subordinate conjunction necessitates another independent clause to complete the thought because it's not complete. When you say when the clock strikes midnight, I mean, it could stand as a proper response to like if someone asked the question like, when is he going to leave when the clock strike midnight? But that's not what we're talking about here. This is talking about like in general sentences, not necessarily as answers to questions. So when you hear like when the clock strikes midnight, that cannot stand as a full sentence and needs a finishing thought, an independent clause to follow it. So that's where he will leave the party comes in. That's an independent clause that follows the dependent clause to finish and form a complete thought. Dependent clauses add information to independent clauses here. So remember that when the clock strikes midnight, he will leave the party. That's how these subordinate conjunctions work.
Thank you. Literally perfect. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I looked on Grammarly. I'm gonna put one more example just in case. It says, once Batman learned that Robin had not been wearing his seatbelt, he took away his keys to the Batmobile. That last part stand on its own, but a lot of people use like the supporting conjunctions like in the beginning to make it like, because you need something else after that. So hopefully that helps. Do you guys have any questions about this? I know this one has a lot of information. Any questions? Okay, I see a thumbs up. Okay, we kind of get it. All right, cool. Then we're gonna go to the next part. Woohoo! Your favorite part. My favorite part is verb conjugations because there's so many ways to say different verbs in English, and it is very frustrating. So, what do we have here? So, you guys know probably that English uses 3 different like past, present, future. These are like called tenses. In some languages, some of the tenses are actually merged together, but in English, we like everything complicated. So we have different tenses depending on if we were talking about something we did, something we're doing now, and something we plan to do. So, past. He was, they were, she tasted, we washed. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, it's just a little mistake there. I guess it was just copied from the present tense table.
My bad.
Yeah, so good.
So we washed, like the ED part, okay?
Yeah, ED comes at the end there.
Okay, so as you can see, verbs take on very different forms. So was is the past tense of is. So it's an entirely different word. However, let's say we have a verb like taste, okay? So taste becomes tasted. In most verbs, you can kind of cheat a little bit and just add the ED at the end. And then boom, past tense, mastered. However, there's some words like are, where it's also an entirely different word, where it would be were. The present tense, we have he is, they are, she tastes, we wash. So we have like different forms once again, but these all stem from like the same verb. So this is like where the past and the future kind of diverge from this form of the verb. So tastes is like, well, she's currently like, she tastes, okay? She tastes an apple. That's present. We wash our dog. That's present. They are here. Or he is asleep. So these might be hard to memorize if you are like learning a different language. So we're keeping it up here. The future part, a lot of these are just kind of just adding will, but I also mention, okay, so he will, they will be, she will taste, we will wash. You see how you kind of just add wash. However, we're going to be kind of going over like the perfect tense, like the perfect form and how it's kind of different. So George, I don't know if you want to go over like what makes past perfect and all these like perfect forms different from the past, like the regular tense.
basically the past perfect tends to the perfect tenses tend to describe something that's like it's like something that like I'm trying to think about how to best describe this using the examples here. Yeah. These perfect forms are augmented using an auxiliary verb, which is have here. Have in these tenses is what gets conjugate, is what's like, it's what changes form. It's like the way you say like, I have a book, you have a book, he has a book, you use the same form of have in whatever tense you're trying to do, the past, present, or the future. But instead of using like some noun that you have, you use a verb in a specific form. I have been, they have been, she has tasted, we have washed. I'm trying to think about how to best describe the difference with the perfect tenses and the regular ones.
Do you want
yeah.
me to tag in a little bit, just a
Yeah,
little bit, and then you can take over? Okay, I think the best way. Okay, we're gonna look at the first example. Past perfect, had. So we mentioned that's kind of the word that's changing. I had been. Past perfect. Present perfect, I have been. So have is kind of implying something currently, and had is referring to both had and been being of past tense. Present perfect has the have been. Mind you, the perfect form literally, like, you're kind of looked down upon for speaking this way. So you might not ever have to use this, but for the SAT, this is where we have the clarifications. The only thing that is changing is the form of which the have is, or, you know, and replicate it to be from the original forms. So future perfect, I will have been. It sounds kind of stupid in my opinion, and no one honestly talks like that except like casually. So if you don't understand it, it's fine. But the main difference is you'll see the tense is meant to match what the past, present, or future is, and then the verb stays the same for every single one. You'll notice how these are kind of all past tense in the sense that the verb is past tense in all of these.
If I can explain,
Yes.
I have an idea now. The perfect tenses generally are referring to like completed actions, or like, yeah. So like in the past, and like the present perfect is saying like we have washed. It's saying like it's done already. It's talking about the now, it's been done already. When you're talking about the future perfect, it says we will have washed. It's like, okay, in the future, the action will be completed already. But although the meaning can also still be expressed like we will wash, we'll wash it. We will have washed adds a bit of emphasis on like the completion aspect, like it will be done. And the same can be said about the past perfect. We had, which here is supposed to say we had washed. It's like, yeah, it's like it's already been done, but the had washed adds emphasis that it's already completed. It adds more emphasis than like it would in the past tense. Although generally, like in casual speech, you won't really need to use much of the perfect tenses as much, but the SAT, you'll most likely run into them at least a few times. So
yeah, because College Board, instead of judging how well you speak English, is just picking and choosing which parts of English you're supposed to know. So if you talk about, like, if you say any of these, you're fine. Does anyone have any questions about this specific conjugation chart? If you want, you can also take a screenshot. Or does everyone feel kind of at least okay about the conjugations here? Yes, type. Oh.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, no, did you have a question?
No, I'm okay.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. So I was just asking if people needed clarification, but it seems like everyone kind of gets it. So you guys are already more big brain than I am. This is actually kind of review for us too. because most of this stuff you don't think about on a daily basis when you talk to people. So we're going to be even more confusing today. What are irregular verbs? So we have some examples here. Okay, we have a present tense, which stems from like an I am, past tense, I was, and then the past participle. What comes after have in the present perfect? I have been. So we have a bunch of words here. We're going to start at the present tense, I am. So the state of currently now, okay? Become, begin, do, get, go, have, no. Why are these irregular? Because as you can see, you're not using like the ed for the past tense as like some other verbs. And these kind of have like their own little words that you use to specify depending on tense. So past tense, what do these words become? Become is became. I was gonna say become becomes became, but that sounds confusing. Okay, but you guys can see on the chart. We have became, begin is actually began, do turns to did, get is got, go went, have had, know knew. So it's pretty understandable by then, you know, you're like, okay, I kind of get this. And then we get to past participle. And some of these you'll say in common speech, some of these not really. Become kind of stays the same, I feel like. So that's kind of easy. Begun. So I have begun. I have done. I have gotten. I have gone. I have had. And I have known. So we have that have, okay? So the only difference is you're adding the have and you have the word here afterwards. It's I don't even say this in common speech most of the time, I feel like. George, I don't know if you want to add something about the irregular verbs.
Yeah, it's mainly, first of all, I'd like to say, the part in the past participle column where it says it's in the present perfect, this actually applies for all of the perfect tenses in the past, including the past and the future. So like you could say, instead of I have become, you could say I had become. It works the same way. That's the past participle is what you use with have in any of the perfect tenses. And yeah, I can say I don't really use this kind of construction, this perfect tense construction very often in my typical speech, but it is more frequently used in written language, which is what the SAT is focusing on primarily. So it's important to know at least the basics of how this works.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, I mean, saying it out loud now, I mean, it's not too difficult, I feel like, because I'm kind of reviewing it myself too. I don't right, I don't talk like this. And I'm kind of learning from my own writing too, ruh-roh, but
yeah, it's also important. I just want to once again emphasize this information may be a lot to take in, especially if you haven't encountered these forms very often at all. So definitely feel free to ask any questions at any point, and we'll do our best to answer or clarify anything that we are showing now.
yeah, and we leave the slides here so you guys can screenshot them, of course. So you guys can look back at these and you don't have to be stuck there like, oh my gosh, I forgot the irregular verbs. Wah. You can always screenshot. So that's why we leave them there. Does anyone have any questions about the irregular verbs, or are we doing good? Okay, I see thumbs up. Yeah, I see thumbs up. Okay, cool. Okay, more people. You guys are big brain. More big brain than I was when I was learning this. So, okay, we have more irregular verbs. So, George, you want to read these this time?
Okay, I want to preface first of all by saying the first two examples that are shown here with lay and lie, a lot of native English speakers get this wrong. I definitely have done it very incorrectly whenever I use these verbs. Safe to say, the College Board most likely isn't going to ask you about these two up here, the first two, lay and lie, because they're very confusing, and even native English speakers get them wrong. So they're probably not going to quiz them, but I will show them here because they're good to know regardless. The The first one is like I lay, as in like I lay a book on the table. I laid a book on the table in the past tense, and then for the perfect tense, I had laid a book on the table. Now the next one is lie, as in like to lie down on a bed. I lie down on a bed. The past tense would be I lay down on a bed. It sounds a little confusing, and it is. That's why a lot of native English speakers get it wrong. And then the past participle, I'm going to be honest, I kind of forgot this existed for the word lie. And you can say, I have lain down on my bed. I had lain down on my bed. Safe to say, you probably won't be using that form. You won't be using that past participle for the verb lie, as in lie down, very often. So you won't need to worry about it too much, but it's still good to know. But yeah, the other examples are not as complicated. So I will go over those now. We have here, I ride, as in I ride a motorcycle or bicycle or something like that. The past tense, I rode a bicycle, and the past participle becomes I have ridden a bicycle. Like you could say, I have ridden a bicycle before. I think we already did get and got actually in the last one, so I'll skip that. The verb see, like as in I see the window. The past tense becomes saw. I saw the window. And the past participle is for the perfect tenses, it becomes like I had seen the windows. I have seen the windows. I will have seen the windows. Next is swim. You could say I swim in the pool or I swim in the ocean, whatever. Past tense, I swam in the ocean. The perfect tense, I had swum in the ocean. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
This is real, by the way. This is the real past participle of swim, but I guarantee you, no one says this. I feel like people say like I have swam more than they have said I have swum, even though that's like not correct. But I looked it up and I was like, who says this? But like,
yeah,
both.
Yeah. Safe to say, I don't think the SAT will like have something like this where it shows you this form or expects you to know this form swum. So you won't need to worry about it. But like I said, much like lay and lie, it's still good to know. You can probably flex on native English speakers by making use of these forms in your speech if you want. But yeah, the last example we have here is the word know, as in I know how to write in Mandarin. You could say that, or anything really. And you can say I knew when the event was. It said I had known for the perfect tenses, or I have known about this. I've known about this event for months. You could say, for example, that's where the perfect tenses can come in for this. But yeah. Yeah, I'll let Danielle continue.
I couldn't have said any better. A lot of these examples, like we mentioned, you probably won't even use, but you can flex in your English class now that the past participle of swim is actually swum, and literally speak better than like 90% of Americans.
Or the proper conjugations of lay and lie, including the past participle for lie being lain.
Yeah, exactly. So you're officially smarter than all Americans. Congratulations. So I have some practice examples. So you guys have to be involved now. So I think okay. I actually have to, hold up. I have the answers. Hold on, I'm gonna share my screen again, I promise. I just want to make sure I'm not messing this up for you guys. I'm just double checking. Okay. So I'm gonna put the examples up once more, and your job is basically I'm gonna call on people, or if you volunteer to raise your hand, then perfect. Then I will call on you. But I'm gonna call on people. Okay, we got someone already, and I haven't even put up the things again. I'm just gonna send the answers to George. just so we know. Everyone knows, same page. So I'm gonna share my screen again. And the first person who's gonna go over the first one. All right. Okay. Yay. It should be coming up. Let me know when you guys see it. Yes, it's loading. Oh, it's taking 10 years. 3. Is it showing?
It's showing for me, yeah.
Okay, I think everyone can see it. Okay, okay. So the first example, Asus. The verb is drive. So what would be the proper way of saying drive in this sentence? Asus. Yes, okay. So Asus is correct. The correct way of saying this is I have driven the car back to its parking spot. Would people normally say this? Probably, but it's a little weird, right? Okay, so the next one, the verb is forgive. Wait, who's it? You guys are fast. Oh my gosh. Okay, actually, let me check something really quick. So I'm gonna read the sentence. I didn't agree with how easily she blank forgive her brother. Forgiven, I feel like you'd have to say like she had forgiven, right?
Yeah, forgiven, it would be the past participle form that you use with the perfect tenses here, but that's not what's in use here. Here, this is like mandating the past tense. Yeah, Type got it in the chat. It's forgave.
Yeah,
Yeah, good job, Type.
epic big brain moment. Okay. So this one's a little harder because we didn't have this example. Okay. You get extra bragging rights if you get this one. I had blank of school last night. It felt like a nightmare. And the verb is dream. Yes. Oh my gosh. You guys are like smart, so smart. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's dreamt. So the sentence becomes, I had dreamt of school last night. It felt like a nightmare.
Me on a daily basis at U Chicago. Kidding. I want to get turned in. Come on. I'm kidding. Okay. Okay, this one. He blanked my sincerity for pity yesterday, with the verb being mistake. Wow.
Nice. Good job, Type and Sarah, for this. The correct form here is mistook. He mistook my sincerity for pity yesterday. Great job. That's, yeah.
Okay. So this one, I'm mean, okay? So what did you blank last night? The verb is right. Ah, I put this one on purpose. You don't actually change this one. I tricked you guys because I put last night. It's like past tense you'd think, but like no. What did you write last night? Because you're asking someone. So in the current present tense. So
yeah.
It's not.
If I can explain, the reason why this verb does not change, the verb right does not change form here is because did here, much like have, the word have, like as in the perfect tenses, like I have eaten, I have forgiven. The did here acts as a sort of auxiliary verb, which is actually what carries the tense information, like the past, present, future. So like, what did you write last night? The did is already indicating past tense, so write does not change form. But if the word did was like, if you replace the word did with the verb had, you would have to change write. So you could say, what had you written last night? Because that's mandating the perfect tense. But here, the word did here is an auxiliary because of the past tense. Past tense in a question.
You guys are so big brain. You guys all like answer all of these with like flying colors. I didn't even have to say the sentence. So if you got all of them right, feel good about yourself. You get bragging rights to your family that you got your practice verbs all correct. But also, if you like miss one or two, don't be bad. Don't feel bad because people like mess them up all the time. I feel like I mess them up all the time. But you're learning, so now you won't ever forget how to do these like verb conjugations. So before we move on, because I know we're going to be moving on from the verb stuff a little bit, Does anyone have any last questions? Or I feel like, I mean, if you guys got them all right, you guys are pretty confident, huh? Yeah, all right, we got some thumbs up. Okay, all right, so. Okay, so we're gonna talk about singular and plural agreement. So the SAT is gonna complicate singular and plural agreement. So for example, a simple noun verb agreement will be separated by a phrase right in the middle. So you're probably like, what are you talking about? So I'm gonna read you these sentences, okay? The first one, the Union of Carpenters advocate for better pay. Okay, seems fine. Sometimes the SAT will ask you to correct a sentence like, the Union of Carpenters advocates for better pay. It sounds really weird. George, you want to say anything?
Yeah. So the reason why the second example is the Union of Carpenters advocates for better pay is correct here is because the main subject to be focusing on here is the union. The of carpenters is simply a modifier for the union. It's a prepositional phrase that's modifying the union. So that's why advocate has to take on the form advocates. If it were just saying like the carpenters, then yes, you would have to say that carpenters advocate for better pay. But since of carpenters is just modifying the subject, the union is a singular word, so it must take like the proper conjugation, advocates. That's why that's correct here.
George, you can honestly like just keep going through these because perfect explanations.
Okay, so for the next example, we have here, if you need to find a book, one should seek assistance from a librarian. Here, it's kind of weird because the subject of the sentence has already been previously established by the first dependent clause of the sentence. If you need to find a book, you is already established as a subject of like the whole sentence here, sort of, because like it's talking about you specifically. It's not talking about someone or like some abstract person, like the way it's saying one should seek assistance from a librarian. So it's kind of weird and it doesn't flow very right because of that already established subject being you, which is why the second correct example is, if you need to find a book, you should seek assistance from a librarian. That sentence continues the subject being established as you into the second part of the sentence, into the second independent clause of the sentence. It's about like subject here. It's like basically subject agreement rather than and person agreement rather than the singular and plural, but it's still something to keep an eye out for, and it's in the similar vein as the singular and plural. The next one, this next one also fits better into like the singular and plural agreement thing we're trying to talk about. The sentence is, the pilot who has flown many planes are captaining our flight. Here, I think it might be a little more clear why it's wrong, right? Because in the first example, the Union of Carpenters, it's a little shorter and it's sweeter, so it seems more likely that it would be like plural. But here, it's talking here. The modifying clause, which modifies the word the pilot, is a lot larger, so it's easier to see why like it may not flow correctly, because the pilot who has flown many planes, the pilot is still the singular subject here, but he's being described a little more with the clause starting with who, saying who has flown many planes. So you can see here that the R is out of place, which is why in the correct example, the pilot who has flown many planes is captaining our flight. The word is here is modifying the pilot, which is in the singular, rather than the plural that may be established by the word many planes, which is in the actual subject of the sentence.
Perfect. I mean, I have nothing to add. Literally, George said it best. So you have these examples. Just make sure that the word you're using or the verb is modifying the correct subject here. It's not planes, it's pilot. So, woohoo! So we are now moving to word choice. So what will you be asked? Okay. So here's some words that people say wrong. Even native English speakers say these wrong. So we have affect versus effect. So what is affect? It's a verb usually, and effect is a noun. So how do we say this? Okay, I have a example sentence here, okay, of both words being used in the same sentence. The biggest effect of the policy was how it affected immigration. Okay, so the only difference obviously is that first letter in both of these words, but affects is implying, the thing that happens. Affected is the verb that we were talking about, immigration is being affected. So it shows like a change or something happens, but to something. Effect is just on its own an effect. So if you can use effect and effect, and you know the difference, you are automatically better than 99% of English speakers, because I have seen this on internet forums where people don't know how to use these words. And I mean, George knows what I'm talking about. I used to mess this up all the time, okay? But now you are big brain. We have choose versus chose, okay? So this one is also kind of hard to know, but choose is a present tense. Chose is a past tense. The sentence I have here, after I chose poorly last time I went to the restaurant, I will be more careful with what I choose today. A little complicated, but I chose poorly last time, past tense. Now I'll be more careful with what I choose. So once you have those side to side. Oh, okay. Thank you for coming, Tab.
Yeah, hope we can see you again next time in our next meeting. Bye now.
Okay, so George, you want to do the other two?
Sure thing. So the next two we have here, funny because we have the confused terms have versus of. Because what tends to happen is here so have is a verb. Clearly, it's an action word. It's like it also can act as an auxiliary, like we've established during the perfect tenses. Of is a preposition connecting the word. The reason these terms are confused is because in certain contexts they can sound almost the exact same, which shows here in the practice questions. I would have can be and generally can also be contracted into I would have, and from there you can probably hear why have and of get confused. So I would have kind of sounds a little bit like I would of, but that's incorrect. And this actually this mistake tends to happen quite a bit with native English speakers. But what's actually supposed to be said here is I would have. It's just the contraction is what causes people to the contraction of have that happens in this example is what tends to trip up native English speakers, which is why they say I would of when it should be I would have. The next one is also the next one here is also pretty fairly common. It's versus it's with an apostrophe. So it's without an apostrophe is indicating possession. The way you say it's similar in the vein of the words my, yours, or my, your, his, her. The way you can say my book, your book, his book. This one you can say its book, a book that belongs to it being something. Maybe we could say we're talking about a dog. I have a dog. Its book is nice. So that's an example of using its as a possession. While it's with an apostrophe means it is. It's a contraction. It's contracting the words it and is to form it is. It's it's the subject and verb together. So for this practice question, we can see it's important that when you purchase a phone, you are certain to check its warranty. The sentence starts with it is, as in it is important, because yeah. And then later in the sentence, when you say you are certain to check its warranty, it's talking about the phone's warranty because that was already established in the previous dependent clause when you purchase a phone. So it's here is referring to the phone's warranty. It's a possessor here. It is like a stand-in for phone because you could say when you purchase a phone, you're certain to check the phone's warranty. You can make it simpler by using its to say you're certain to check its warranty. Yeah.
Perfect. So just so you guys know the clarification, if you guys are ever asked to pick words in response to what word should be in the sentence, these are probably the most common terms that people mess up. I know I have plenty of times, but not anymore because I'm big brain. And George and I are big brain. So we don't do this anymore. But like, okay, texting, the biggest one, it's people mess it up all the time, even though I know like the rule for it. So if you mess up too, no one is gonna hound on you. But for the SAT, knowing these, you're already ahead of the curve. So, and we have more, yay! These are even more fun because it's like a meme at this point with some of these. So the first two. George, you want to say anything before I get into why these are horrible?
No, it's okay. I can go into like the last two because especially the last one's particularly horrible. But yeah, I'll leave you the first two to you.
Okay. I love these. Okay, then and then. I've messed these up a lot and I didn't really know the rules, but now you do. Now you are a big brain. Then is for comparisons. Then is for time. Okay. Example, I had more time back then, but less time than I will probably have next year. So you're probably looking, this whole sentence is talking about time. What do you mean? Then we're talking about, I had more time back then. That's the time part, implying, some time passed. But we're comparing two different times here, which makes this sentence like literally perfect if you understand why both are different here, because you're comparing the time back then with the time you'll have next year. But less time than I will probably have next year. So you can see how you can use both of these words perfectly in this sentence, even though, yes, the subject is about like time and what you're going to do. You can see what is clearly being compared, we use then. But if it's just the time, if you just said, I had more time back then, perfect. So my favorite one, oh, George, did you want to say something?
Another example of the use of then with an E is in like saying if sentences, like you could say, if I have enough time, then I will go to the park. Although the then is not really, it's not too necessary there, but if you want to include it, that's the form you have to use, the then. It's like, since it's talking about, I guess it also serves as a purpose of like as a result, like a result connector. You're establishing like if something happens, the then it like shows what the result of if that first thing is true. That's why in like programming languages you tend to hear of if then statements. Like if something is like correct or is true or will be true, then something happens. That's why it's used. The word then with an E is used there. So
you're giving me senior year flashbacks when I was learning Python and my entire code is just flooded with if then statements. My gosh. So yes, if you are a genius in coding, you've heard of if then statements. That is also when you would use then. But I imagine not everyone knows Python, so that is okay. In writing, you also have if then statements. I think it's kind of popular in science writing too, like for hypothesis. So that is another context that you can use it in. So we're gonna go to my favorite one out of all of these, which is why I wanted to say it. There, and there. You already know where we're getting. Okay, they're spelled differently, and they all have different usages. So they all sound the same, I get it. But there, with an RE at the end, that's a place. We will go there. There is possession. It was their book. the other there doesn't really make sense there, right? So you would use their book ending in IR. There is like a contraction, so you have the apostrophe to kind of shorten the two words. It's just they are. So I have a very fun sentence here. When we travel over there to our friend's house, their hospitality is remarkable. In fact, they are the best hosts I know. All sound similar, but you guys can see perfectly how each example is used here in these sentences. There's not really much more I can say here other than you just have to remember the spelling. Right, okay, perfect. See, Max got it perfect. So yeah, George, you can kind of just cover the rest.
Yeah, I was also going to say that this kind of confusion between the three theirs is not it's not as common as the other mistakes like it's versus it's with an apostrophe, but it is nonetheless kind of you might see it sometimes in some people's writing, especially online. They tend to like mix them up, but now you won't never get to do that. You'll never be doing that again because now you understand the distinction as shown here. But yeah, next we'll go into which versus that. This one I feel like I've confused myself quite a bit, but which here is supposed to be the function of the word which here is supposed to be non-restrictive. It's supposed to provide extra information, but it's not necessary. Like you can remove the which and the extra information and it will still be functional. Whereas with that is restrictive. It provides essential information, and without the that clause that it provides, the sentence may take on a different meaning or have like a critical part of its meaning lost. So let's look at this practice example. The house that was on fire burned to the ground, which was unfortunate. So you could say like the house burned, you could say the house burned to the ground, but that's a bit, I mean, it's a bit ambiguous. You don't know, you might not know which house you could be talking about because you could be like there could be like a ton of houses. But when you add that clause, the house that was on fire, you establish a specific house that the reader or the speaker and the listener may know of already. You might have seen, like maybe there was in this case, maybe there was like a fire at a specific house, and that's what this is. That is like helping refer to the house that was on fire. It's talking about that specific house. Whereas here, which was unfortunate, that's not necessarily essential information, as it's not as essential as that the house that was on fire. Like you can have the sentence without that, it'll be perfectly fine. I mean, it is unfortunate, but it's not necessary to like the overall meaning of the sentence, like in specifying something specific. But yeah, now this last one right here, this is at this point, it's actually kind of fading from most English speakers' vocabulary entirely. So because it's so common that it's increasingly becoming the norm. It's basically increasingly becoming like an established and accepted norm to not make a distinction between these two. But this is who versus whom. The word who here acts as like a subject, the way you would say I, you, I am, you are, he is. You would use who in the same context, like who is, whereas whom here is used as an object. The same way you would say me, him, her, like I help him, I help you, I help her, or he helps me. You would use whom there. Although you would not use it in that order of it. You would not use it in that word order. You would not use whom with that word order. It would have to be changed around into a question in the word order, but you can see in the examples here. To start, we have who is going to the movie. So we establish here, like we're asking a question about like, well, we don't know the person that is going to the movie. So we're asking about who they are or who's going. And here we have, in the next one, we have from whom did you purchase the ticket? From is a preposition here that mandates the object form, which is why you use whom the same way you would use like from him. You could answer a question, from whom did you purchase the ticket? You could answer it from him, from her, which is why you use whom here. From whom did you purchase the ticket? This is asking about, like, you bought a ticket, but you don't know the person that you bought it from, which is what you're asking here. From whom did you purchase the ticket? Or you could say, whom did you help? Like you're asking, you helped someone, but we don't know. We don't know the person. So you're asking, whom did you help? Because you could say, I help him, I help her. You'd say, so the him, her are objects. So whom has to be an object as well when you say something like, whom did you help? But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this kind of distinction is rapidly and already kind of, it has faded a lot from most English speakers, like grammar and vocabulary knowledge, to the point that if you don't use this distinction in your speech, you're probably going to be fine. And I don't think the SAT will ask you any questions involving this distinction, but it is nonetheless a good one. It's nonetheless a good one to know, especially when reading more formal works where this distinction still exists. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who says whom in real life unless you're trying to sound like extra impressive. So it just helps to know these confused terms. I feel like I have memory of the SAT practice test asking me like a question about whom at least once for no reason. So it exists, but it's fine. So those are all the examples. I actually think we should probably close up this session so we can you guys can kind of digest this information, and then we also have time to answer questions. I know you guys are probably like sitting through this like, I am so bored, I am so tired, stop lecturing me about English, Danny. So does anyone have any questions before I start talking about, additional resources, our study group, and any last concerns people have? You guys have any questions? If not, I feel good because that means we did very good and you guys are now super big brain. So I will actually share this PowerPoint the next time we have like writing language, or I'll just divide the PowerPoint so we can have one part cover the ones we did today so you guys can make your own notes. Or yeah, but first I'm actually going to show you guys the study group. So we'll skip all this part, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so some of you I already know are in the study group, but since you guys were asking about joining our WhatsApp, this is the link. So go right ahead, type that in, join our WhatsApp group. It's our study group. This is where I upload the PowerPoint presentations usually, any additional notes, any reminders, and you guys can also ask questions. So you guys, I'm assuming, are kind of practicing on your own, trying to use these resources for the first time. You guys can ask me or George. You can ask questions directly, openly, and then everyone can interact with each other. So I'm gonna leave this here. So make sure, guys, you all join. I'm gonna give you guys like a second or two to join. Which will lead me to the final part, the next session. So you guys probably are smarter than me when it comes to math, but just in case, we're all going to be covering the math calculator section August 1st. So same time every Monday, 4 p.m. Central District Time. Here's the link for you to register through our Zoom registration for SAT prep. The next time, if you haven't already registered, you'll receive a link for the session. So make sure you attend next week. And you guys are probably wondering, okay, well, when are we doing writing and language again? So how it goes is we usually do reading, writing language, math, calculator, math, no calculator, then we reset the cycle. So we will be doing writing and language in a few weeks. Once again, with more example passages, with more information to go to. Oh my gosh, where are you joining us from, Max? I know Taib is actually from Morocco. So I'm actually surprised how many like international students we've had joining us for these sessions. If you guys want to just like share where you guys are joining us from, perfect. Which I emphasize even more. I am like impressed that you guys are up at this time doing SAT prep. Like that is crazy, but I really hope that we've been helpful. Central Asia. Okay, bet. That's awesome. George, you want to say any last remarks before we let our international participants sleep, get some well-deserved rest?
Yeah. I don't think I have anything further to add besides me recommending the resources that we were discussing earlier in the session to practice these, and to feel free to ask, like if you're like working through the practice exams that College Board offers, and let's say you do the writing portion and check your answers and there's some you're confused about, you can feel free to write us in the WhatsApp group, and we'll try and clarify why the answer may be wrong, or if there's something else you're confused about with it.
Thank you, George. So after the session, I'll send you guys some like practice stuff so you guys can do on your own before we meet again for writing and language, but that is a big bulk of it. So you are all dismissed, especially you guys that are up at 2 a.m. That is crazy. Please sleep well, you guys. Thank you for joining us. Please come again next week and we'll do math calculator section. And yeah, so good night or good evening or good morning, some of you. And I'll see you guys around.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye now, you're dismissed.